Alrighty. And with that, I think let's get started. Why not? So, here's our agenda for today. We're going to start out by defining vendor management. It's quite an ambiguous term. I think it's one of those buzzwords we hear at the moment, but what do we mean when we say vendor management? We're then going to go over adding vendors into MaintainX. We're going to talk about how vendors relate to purchase orders and how vendors relate to work orders. That last point you may have covered before, that most recent point, probably a new feature. So we're really excited to introduce that to you. And then, of course, final point here, measuring vendor performance. As we discussed in our last webinar, everything in the end comes down to reporting. So we want to be able to link that back at the end here. FAQs, is this webinar being recorded and will you get a copy? Yes, you will. A recording of this webinar will be sent to you via email on July the 2nd. If you don't receive it, please do check your spam. We will be sending it then. Second FAQ, how can I ask questions throughout the webinar? Well, you can submit your questions using the chat or the Q&A panel in the Zoom console. Questions submitted may be answered live. So if you look at that control panel now, you'll see there is a chat and Q&A place. You can go in there, you can drop your questions in at any time. We have our support warriors on the phone with us right now, so they'll be answering them in the chat. If your question doesn't get answered right away, it may be we're holding that to the end to answer in the live Q&A. A little about MaintainX. Our mission is to transform the way frontline professionals manage the equipment and facilities that power our world. We are building for the long term, pushing innovations in mobile workflows, real-time analytics, and open APIs. And of course, we partner with our customers. We have a world-class team that develops and supports our products with industry expertise in manufacturing facilities and more. And of course, just a few of our recent awards on the screen there. Sometimes you've just got to show off a little bit. Industry-leading companies trust MaintainX with their operations, so there may be names on this screen that you recognize, but as I always mention, there is a place at MaintainX for everyone. We can help any kind of organization with their maintenance operations, from big multinational corporations right down to your smaller mom and pop shops. There's always something that we can help with. So you got a home here. All right, that's my preamble. First thing up. Vendor management defined. How do you currently incorporate vendors into the ways in which you track maintenance? So how are you linking your vendors with maintenance? Are you listing them as a supplier of parts, contractor for work orders? Are we using to filter reports based on specific suppliers and contractors? Are you doing all of the above, or are you doing none of the above? Feel free to pop your responses in there. And be honest. There's no correct answer here. And when we're ready, I think we can take a look at those results. There we go. Okay, perfect. So we have about 17% using for parts, 19% for work orders, 2% linking this through to reporting. A good third of you are doing all of the above. That's wonderful. And about a third doing none of the above. So what I'm seeing here, we've got a third not using them at all, a third pretty comfortable and confident, and a third who are right in that midpoint, maybe touching on some things, maybe not touching on others. And that's what we're here to help for today. We want everyone to move a step forward. So if you've never used this before, let's introduce you. If you're using some features, let's introduce you to some more. If you're using everything now, let's figure out how we can optimize on that and how we can make it even better. So something for everyone. Thanks for your participation. All right, so let's get into this. How do we define vendor management? Well, a vendor is a third-party entity that provides goods or services used in your maintenance operations. So that can be quite a few things, right? Some examples would include your parts suppliers, your external contractors, people who sell your tools, software providers. It could even be things like consultants and trainers. Vendor management, therefore, means the way that you incorporate these third-party entities into your maintenance workflows. So what do we give them access to? What do they see? How do we incorporate them into our internal workflows? How do we manage this whole process? So sounds like a bit of work. So you may be thinking, why does this matter? Well, firstly, as we've talked about in recent webinars, supply chain disruptions. Parts purchasing needs to be accurate and timely to compensate for unforgiving supply chains. We have to be at the top of our game here. We have to have things digitized. We have to be able to make data-driven decisions to better serve our companies. Labor shortages, my second point here. We have shrinking in-house maintenance staff. So it means an increased reliance on external contractors. A lot of you have spoken to me about the fact it's really difficult to hire right now. It's really difficult to find skilled labor. So with that kind of macro climate taken into effect, we do have to rely more on external contractors. But we want to make sure that we're able to get the same level of work done, right? So we need to make sure we are managing these vendor workflows as best we can. So, since vendors operate outside your facility's ecosystem, vendor records can experience quite a few issues, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware. Firstly, the inability to enforce standard record-keeping requirements, such as contact details and supply attribution, can be a bit of a problem. We have different people recording data in a bunch of different ways, right? And as soon as we're looking at that, if we're comparing or trying to compare incomparable data, we're not going to get very far. Second point here, vendor information is siloed from the rest of your maintenance records. They're seen as two separate things, whereas actually, if we're looking from a regulatory body's standpoint, if we're looking at the work that we're doing, we need to see that all in one place. We need to know what was done regardless of who did it. So we need to try and avoid point number 2 there. Why does this matter? We always want to bring this back to why does this matter? When we're giving you a job to do, why should we have to do this? Well, firstly, expanding vendor networks. Diversified supply chains are better able to withstand shocks and recover from disruptions. Let's not wait until an issue occurs to then go in and fix it. Let's try bolstering our approach right now so that we can avoid any issues down the road. Secondly, workflow accuracy. Automation minimizes the risk of sending a work order or purchase order to the wrong vendor and therefore incurring delays due to missing vendor information or, incorrect recipient, whatever it might be. We're really improving that efficiency there. Second poll, let's see who's awake. How many vendors do you rely on as part of your maintenance strategy? None, 1 to 5, 5 to 20, 20 plus. And we're talking here about, people who supply parts, people who supply materials, people who provide your assets, people who provide trainings, could be external contractors as we discussed. How many vendors would you say? Alrighty, let's take a look. Okay, so good news. No one is using none. That's very good. I'd be a bit concerned if that were the case. We have 20% using 1 to 5, 40% 5 to 20, and another 40% on that 20 plus. That's a lot of vendors, right? So it's really important that we're able to record these and manage the processes effectively. If you have more than 20 vendors, if you have 6 vendors, you can't keep everything square in your head. You can't keep all that information siloed. We need it to be aggregated in one space. So let's take a look. First thing we want to do is add those vendors into the system. Let's scroll across and see what's hopefully a very familiar screen here. So I'm going to head into vendors right here. As you can see, I have a list of vendors already. You may have these, you may not have these. If you have none, don't worry, we'll get started. All you're going to do is you're going to head up to this top right corner and we're going to click on new vendor right here. I'm going to put in the name. Very creatively named organization. And I can put in any relevant information, description, address, contacts, files, so on and so forth. It's really important that we have the full information in here. This is what's going to allow us to send information to the correct person as we go. We want to make sure we have all of our contacts in here as well. You can have as many contacts as you like, so don't feel you are limited to one per vendor. If you have multiple contacts at a vendor, add them in. Why not? Now for this vendor is clearly supplying us with parts, right? So we want to add in any relevant information here. So I would want to link which locations does this vendor service? Which locations do they send parts to? Which assets are they related to? And which parts are they supplying? Most importantly, I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to say they supply us with the following 6 parts. Now what happens is we have a centralized hub of information here. If anyone's interested in information on Mary's part supply, what it is and what it does, they can head right to this page and see what parts they're responsible for, what locations they service, what assets are linked, and we can even see the contact information. If you'd like, you can even add custom fields in here, much like we have on assets. If there's further information you'd like to capture about a vendor, you are able to do so via custom fields. Simply head into your settings to do so. So this is for a parts supplier. The other main sort of form of vendor we'd like to focus on today is our external contractors. So Mary's external contracting. There we go. Now we may want to set this up slightly differently to a parts supplier. Of course, we'd still want the contact information. That doesn't change. We would still want that to be in here. But maybe this time, we might not want parts to be linked to the supplier. It might not be relevant. We may want locations. It may be relevant, it may not, if they service specific facilities but don't service other ones. So we'll put them in there. Most definitely, though, we're going to want assets. We're going to know what piece of information, piece of equipment they are actually working on. So I'm going to link in here, this company services these 3 assets. Now, a fun feature linking to, one of our other newer features in here is that vendors can also be linked to work order templates. So a work order template being a standardized form of how you do a job every single time, you can link vendors to those contracts, to those templates. So say, for example, if I go into Apex Mechanics right here, I can say I have 2 work order templates related to them. They're responsible for my monthly forklift inspection and my weekly wrapper inspection. So really, we're tying all different modules of MaintainX together here when we're creating our vendors. As a reminder, if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat at any time, and our team will help you out. So we know how to add vendors. Best practices, let's make sure their details are complete and standardized. If you have naming conventions, use them for all of the vendors. If you have custom fields, let's try populate those for all of your vendors. We really want to be able to look at vendor A and vendor B and compare apples to apples. Secondly, we need to connect vendors to all relevant parts, assets, and work order templates and locations. And that means it will then auto-populate the correct information when ordering parts and generating work orders, which is going to reduce that risk of error that we talked about before. Any kind of automation we can get in here will help reduce your human error. It's natural. We all do it. And will make your operations a little more efficient. So things to bear in mind. All right. Let's hop into vendors and how they relate to purchase orders. This is something we've talked about recently. Most parts purchasing issues are a result of decentralization and poor visibility into order statuses. This can result in production losses, overordering, and increased labor costs. All those combined, lower profitability, the exact opposite of what we're looking to do, I'm sure, in all of our companies. Why does this matter? Well, high-risk environments. In Q1 of 2024, 33.8% of manufacturing leaders listed supply chain disruptions as a primary business challenge. We're looking at supply chain digitization across the board as well. So 76% of manufacturers are adopting digital tools to gain enhanced visibility into the supply chain. So we want to make sure we're keeping up. We want to make sure we're doing the same as our peers, as our competitors are, and we want to make sure we're prepared to deal with this environment. Your vendors, centralizing them in MaintainX, linking them with your purchase orders is going to absolutely help with this. Out of curiosity, before I show you how we do this, how many systems do you currently use to send and receive purchase orders for maintenance components? So that could be parts and supplies. And by systems, I mean, it could be different portals you have. It could be sending an email. It could be making a phone call. It could be a Post-it. I've seen it before. Whatever different methods you're using to send and receive purchase orders, let us know. Post-its was a fun one, honestly. Okay, let's have a look. I'm impatient. Can't wait. Okay, beautiful. So none using pen and paper. Reasonable. Split pretty evenly there. A third, a third, a third. 17, 17, 15. One, effectively 1 to 2, and 3. So pretty even split there. That's interesting to me. What I would say is if you're using one, That's incredible. That's great. If you're using more than one, let's pull them into one system. If you're using none, let's get you a formalized system in place. When we're using one system that's connected to the rest of our maintenance activities, it's going to help us be a lot more centralized, a lot more organized, and a lot more efficient, which sounds great, right? So let's see how we can actually do that. How are we going to make it happen? Let's take a look into vendors and purchase orders. Hopping back across here. Now, because we like to give you the luxury of choice at MaintainX, there are 3 different ways that you can submit a purchase order within the system. We could start in our vendors page right here. So I'm going to go back to our vendor, Mary's Parts Supply, and I could hit new purchase order right here. As you'll see, that will then populate with the correct vendor information. And we mentioned before, we want to automate as much as possible and remove those barriers, those challenges that might lead to human error. As you can see right here, it says relevant parts at the top. That's every part I've linked when we added our vendor to Mary's Parts Supply. So I can make sure I'm sending the right purchase order to the right person. So first way, through the vendor page and create a purchase order. Second method, if we go into our purchase orders tab right here, is just to create a new purchase order from scratch. Nothing wrong with doing that. You would then fill in your vendor and continue like so. The third method, and my personal favorite method, is if we go into parts inventory here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter for needs restock. And then I can easily pull up a list of every part that is needed for my organization. I can select one, I can select multiple, and I can just create purchase order like so. There we go. I'm going to add my vendor in here. I can choose the amount I would like to order. I can add in any relevant part numbers, really any information that I would need to make sure this order comes right to me. I can add in any taxes and costs, all the usual information. You can add in a shipping address, contact, phone number, due date. I'm going to say I'm very impatient. I want this tomorrow. And I can attach any relevant files as well. I often get asked this question, can we attach a file to a purchase order? Yes, you can. Pop it in here. And just like that, we've created a purchase order. Now, we have one more step to go. As you may be aware, your full users might want to request a purchase order, and you might want, some way to vet those before they go out to your vendors. So that's what we can do here. They come in as a purchase request, and as an admin, I have the ability to approve a purchase order here. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to approve this one. It looks great to me. And then I have the choice between exporting it to PDF or sending it to the vendor. I'm going to send this to the vendor, and there we go. Now, what would this look like on the vendor side? Great question, Mary. Glad you asked. So they would receive an email with an attachment like so of our purchase order. So all of the information we filled in that purchase order is now live in here. Pretty straightforward. Back at our company over here, we're waiting and we're wondering, is this ever going to come in? What's going to happen here? Well, that's where we really want to keep on top of our purchase orders. So let's head into our list view right here. And what I'd like us to see is that we have the filters we need here. You'll have very soon a lot more than 5 purchase orders in your system. Right now, it's easy for me to look at these and see what's approved, what's pending, what's completed, what I'm waiting on. When you have a lot, it's more difficult to do. So we want to make use of our filters, filter for the specific vendor, filter for the status we're looking for, filter for who it's assigned to. And we can also toggle these columns right here to put them in order. So if I wanted to see, for example, just everything that's approved at the top or anything that's pending, I can order my columns, and it's much easier for me to manage my purchase orders in here. Let's hop back. This has been gone now for a full 10 minutes, and because Mary's Parts Supply is incredibly efficient, they've already sent us the parts and we're ready to fulfill. So all we do is we click on fulfill, and we can pop in the amount that we have received. Now I'm going to say this wasn't a full shipment. They did it in such a rush, they missed a few parts. No problem. We'll confirm and fulfill, and it will update to partially fulfilled. When we have received the rest of our units in here, we can just update it like so. Confirm and fulfill. And then all I need to do is complete my purchase order right here. And there you go. From when we created that vendor, we linked in the relevant information. Then when creating a purchase order, it's far easier to make sure it was accurate because we already had the relevant parts, we already had the relevant contact information, we were already good to go. That's how we reduce human error. That's how we make the system more efficient. All right. To recap here, best practices, use that table view, use those filters for better visibility. It will give you a bird's eye view of all your purchase orders, and they can build up quite quickly, as I'm sure everyone in purchasing knows. You can use your filters to zero in on exactly the purchase order that you're looking for. Best practice number 2, keep complete vendor contact details for proper routing. That's how we know it's going to the correct person. Very important. We don't want it being sent off to a random email address and getting lost in the ether. Third point, create purchase orders directly from parts inventory. So you can leverage embedded workflows within the parts inventory module to generate purchase orders directly from the list of understocked parts. So make sure you're not over ordering something you have, and make sure you're not under ordering something. Make sure we're getting enough in of the correct parts at any given time. A lot to think on there, and I'm going to give you approximately no time to do so. We're going to move right into vendors and work orders. So we've spoken before in previous webinars about the linkage between vendors and purchase orders. I hope that's solidifying. I hope that's helping. I hope it's helping you at your organization. Linking vendors and work orders is a newer feature that I would love to introduce you to today. So let's look at the background context, the reality of externally contracted maintenance. While external contractors can help to address labor shortages, the incorporation of third parties into your maintenance deliverables come with its own risks, of course, as everything does, such as lack of visibility into work status, communication obstacles, and siloed maintenance data. I'm sure that's relatable across the board. Why does this matter? Increased reliance on third-party labor. So 20% of maintenance across industries is outsourced, with lack of skilled labor cited as the top reason. We have a lot of third-party labor here. We want to make sure we're managing it properly. We want to make sure we can see what's going on. We want to make sure we can communicate, and we want to make sure it's linked with the rest of our information. Why do we want to make sure it's linked with the rest of our information? Great question, Mary. Centralized audit trails, next point here. Compliance responsibility lives with the manufacturer, regardless of whether the work was completed externally or in-house. That governing body does not care if it was done by you or if it was done by one of your contractors. They want to see if it was done and if it was done properly and if it was up to spec. So we need to make sure we have that information all together to make sure we're doing things properly and also to protect ourselves. So, Paul, how often do you share work orders with technicians outside your facility? So how often are you having someone, come in, get something done, and you're letting them see a work order? At least once a month? At least once a week? Rarely or never. Again, I'm going to remind you, honesty is the best policy. No right answers, no wrong answers. All right, let's take a look. Let's see what we got. At least once a month, 26%. At least once a week, 31%. And then combined between rarely and never, what are we looking at? 43% there. Okay, pretty even split. We haven't even split across the board on all of these today. You guys are very consistent. Interesting. So for those who are using it rarely or never, I'm curious if that is because we don't have the ability to or because we aren't using them. Based on the answers we had earlier on in the session, I would imagine it's because that information is just siloed, right? People are coming in doing the work, but we're not necessarily sharing a work order. Well, we're going to give you the ability to do so. That should help you a lot with the concerns we raised in the last slide. For everyone who's already doing it, brilliant. Let's do it within MaintainX now. And if you are doing it within MaintainX, let's make sure we know all the features available. Let's take a look. I'm very excited to show you guys this. This is the first time I'm doing this on one of these webinars. It is a feature that I think is so useful. And yeah, I hope you like it. So there are 3 ways that we can share a work order externally. Just like we gave you 3 ways to share a purchase order externally, there are 3 ways that you can share a work order as well. So firstly, I'm going to hop into my work order right here. And I'm going to make sure that I have the correct vendor attached to this work order. So we scroll all the way down to vendors. No, it's not these guys. It's Mary's external contractor, and that's who's helping me here. Perfect. Now that I've updated that, I know that it's going to go to the right person. None of that manual work we were talking about before. First method we have here. Let's head to the 3 dots in the top right-hand corner of the work order, and we can export to PDF. 3 guesses what that does. You can choose what size you want your images to be. You can choose how detailed you'd like your procedure to be, and you can choose what you would want included on the PDF, because of course, some things we might want our vendors to see, other things may be internal information. Myself, for example, I'm going to get rid of cost on here. I don't want them to see that. And there we go. Now that we have that downloaded, we will be able to email it to the vendor. That's method number 1. But question, why would we do that when we can skip a step and do it all within MaintainX? So let's look at method 2. 3 dots, email to vendors. That's going to save us from downloading the PDF, then putting it in email, then sending it off. A lot of my customers often mention, oh, but I want to put a message in there. Absolutely, you can now do so. There we go. Again, we can choose our image size, what form of our procedure we'd like, and what's going to be included on the PDF. And we can just send that work order as PDF. Problem solved. But another question for you. Now what happens? Now that person has the work order, sure, but they could fill it out. They could return us maybe a PDF. We're asking a lot of steps of them there to do something else. That is where the information gets siloed, right? We've asked them to do something, they're maybe doing it, but the process they've followed is on their side. And what we're waiting for is on our side. We want to be able to bridge that gap. We want to be able to pull that information all into one place, which sounds pretty magical, and it is. So let me show you how to do it. On this work order, you may notice a new button right here, Share Externally. When we click on that, we have the option to toggle on Enable External Link. So if this is toggled off, no one will be able to see it. They won't be able to access that work order outside of the organization. When it's toggled on, they can see that work order. They can't see anything else. They aren't gaining access into your site. They aren't, taking any of your information. They can just have access to that work order itself. Now, because I added the vendor to the work order, as you can see, it's already linked the correct contact right here. And all I would need to do is include a message if I want to, but click Send Contacts, and away we go. What does that look like on the vendor's side? Let's take a look. So, your vendor would receive an email, much like this one. Just share my screen. There we go. Company name has shared a work order with you. We've been shared a work order. I can see some basic information on here, the due date, which organization it's from, that'd be your company name, the priority. But I can't see more about that right now. All they'd have to do is click Access Work Order, and let's see what they see. So this is entirely on the vendor's side. They are able to see the due date, the priority, any images we've popped. They can see what they're working on, what location they're looking at, and they can see a procedure in here as well, which I did not share because I'm silly. So let me just do that real quick. There we go. Helps if I do that. There we go. In any case, your contractor would be able to come on here, see the procedure, fill out the procedure as they go, and even leave a comment to say, hey, Mary, I think you left out the procedure here. There we go. That would then send to you, and you will be able to see that on your side of this work order. When they finish their work here, when they've completed that procedure, when they've filled out any inspection checks, filled out any signature lines, filled out anything they need to do, they can then click Finish Work Order. What that's going to pop up right here is some more information. They can record how long it took to complete the task. They can record how much it costed, and they can even attach a file and picture here. Another FAQ we receive all the time. Can they submit an invoice? Yes, this is exactly how they would do so. And you can double check their cost lines up with the invoice that you've received. There we go, submit. And it's gone through. The work order is marked complete. We notified the work order owner that you have finished the work. So it's really easy for them to access. It's really easy for them to fill out, and then we can receive the updates we need. So right within here, I can see the comment that they left. I think you left out the procedure, which I did. You can see the work that they did. You can see what was filled out. You can see the costs that have come in. So I can see they added 2 hours and 30 minutes of time. They added $100 of costs that will always come in the other cost section. And I could see the image there as well. Now, on the vendor side, it told them that they'd been marked as done. It's done. Their part is done. However, on your end, of course, we wouldn't want that coming through automatically as done, because how can you go through and vet it? How can you make sure that that invoice is accounted for? How can you make sure the work was done properly? And so on and so forth. So it will automatically default to coming through on hold on your end. So you can review, and then you can mark as done to have the final say when that was actually completed. Pretty cool, huh? It's a feature I'm very excited about. So 3 methods for sharing work orders externally. First one, exporting the work order as a PDF. It's okay. Second one, emailing the work order via MaintainX. Getting better. We've automated some processes there. We make sure it's going to the right person. We make sure they're getting the right information. But by far the best, in my humble opinion, share an interactive version of the work order. This will allow them to fill out the procedure, leave comments, upload attachments. They don't need a MaintainX account to do this, but you're bringing them into your workflow so your information remains centralized, as we discussed, is the ultimate goal. Benefits: get real-time status updates and communicate directly with the contractor, and pull reports on externally shared work orders. Everything we do in some way has to result back to the reporting. I know it's something that, we don't find the most exciting maybe, but it's essential to make sure that we're making those data-driven decisions. That being said, it's really difficult to measure vendor performance because we have a limited understanding of vendor throughput and spending efficiency, and it's difficult to make comparisons with your in-house maintenance data. Again, apples and oranges. Why does this matter? Well, understanding return on investment. 53.7% of manufacturing leaders noted that higher prices are making it harder to compete and remain profitable. We need to make sure that we're getting a good return on our investment. Good bang on our buck. Make sure we're putting our money where it results back in the most for us. Make sure we're making good choices. Secondly, communicating insights. Increased oversight requires the ability to communicate holistic maintenance reports to stakeholders across the organization. Everyone's got eyes on this. We want to make sure we can provide the data that people of all levels are going to require. So, poll here. How do you currently track costs and completion rates for external contractors? We have the options of anecdotally. You use MaintainX to do so. You use a separate system, and you don't. And by anecdotally, I mean, it's in someone's head somewhere. You can remember, I'm sure this vendor did this, this happened, this happened. Okay, let's take a look. I love these polls. So anecdotally and I don't, combined, we've got about 35%, about a third there. Using MaintainX, only 11%, and using a separate system, about 54%. Interesting. So let's see how we can wrap this all up within MaintainX and give you an all-in-one system. Again, centralize all of our information. Let's take a look. All right. We know how the information got in. First thing we did, we made a vendor. Second thing we did a purchase order, we did a work order, whatever was needed, we got the information in here. Now we need to know how to report on that. And again, it's a few different things we can do. So I'm going to start with vendors right here. If I go to, say, Apex Mechanics right here, and if I scroll down, I can see my work order history. I can easily find the work orders that they completed or they were tagged on in here. I can see if that volume is increasing. I can see if it's decreasing. I can see if there are any changes in here. This is the most simple way to find that information. Now, if we want to get a bit more in depth, which I'm absolutely certain you do with your numbers, we're going to head, shockingly, into the reporting section right here. What we're starting out on here is our summary screen, as I'm sure most of you are aware. We can filter for our time range, and we can see some kind of, higher level information on what's happening within the system. All this information is pulled from work orders directly. First filter right here. Yeah, I'm looking at all the information for all of my vendors, but what about if I wanted to get specific and only see information for a specific vendor? Great, I can do that in here. I can see, how many were preventive, how many were reactive. I can see what the status of those are. I can see the time and the cost that was spent for that given vendor. And I can see the time to complete as well in here. I can also see what was on time and overdue. Looks like we're doing good with this vendor. Maybe it's not the same across the board. So that would be vendor by vendor, which is handy. But we also might want to change here between shared externally and not shared externally. So this is how we make the comparisons between our in-house maintenance team and our external contractors. So you can see I'm just building up my external contractors in here. So how do we get that information? How do we kind of drill down to the roots of it? There are two reports that I want to focus on mainly in here today, and that is the time and cost report and the on-time v overdue report in here as well. And that's to make some different comparisons. The first comparison I'd like to make for myself is between vendors. If I've decided I'm using external contractors to get this work done, I want to know who's the most efficient, who's the most costly, just have that information at my fingertips. So I can head into either of these graphs. I'm going to go into time and cost, and I can group by vendor. So what I'm looking at here is for this given time frame, I'm looking at this month. Here are all of my vendor costs. Now I can order those, and I can see who's my most expensive vendor in here and who's my cheapest vendor in here. I think I know who'll be getting my business. You could do a comparison between the cost and the total time. We can build a dashboard to pull in more data, such as how many work orders were completed. Like I say, were they on time v overdue? We can make those comparisons as we want to in here, but the data lives here for us to make those comparisons. Now, comparing between vendors is one thing. What about if we want to compare between our in-house maintenance team and our external contractors or external vendors? No problem at all. Again, I'm going to direct you to a custom dashboard, and I will do this quite quickly, but if reporting is something that interests you and if making custom dashboards is something that's relevant to you, I thoroughly recommend heading to support down here, MaintainX Academy. We gave a webinar on reporting just last month that spent an hour on this exact topic. So for now, I want to make a custom dashboard that compares the time and cost spent this month between my in-house maintenance team and my external contractors. So I'm going to filter for the information I want. This will be for my in-house maintenance team. And all I need to do is add to dashboard here. I'm going to make a new dashboard, called it in-house v external. You can make it something much less inflammatory, but there we go. And we can change this filter for our second tile. I want to make sure I'm just looking at my external contractors in here, and I'm going to add that to the dashboard. There we go. Now to see my custom dashboard, I can go to custom dashboards, make sure I hit publish so that everyone can see that information, and I click on my dashboard. So right here, right away, I'm able to make some comparisons between my in-house team and my external team. I'm looking at time and cost, but the other graph I mentioned as being quite handy would be on time v overdue, because we're not only looking at how much it cost and how much time was spent, but we're looking at the efficiency as well. That's a really big point my customers come back to time and time again. So for that, I thoroughly recommend looking at our on time v overdue. And also you may want to take a look at your time to complete graph as well. So feel free to make a custom dashboard with tiles that will be relevant to you to make sure that you're able to make the comparisons you would like to, whether it's between different vendors or whether it's between vendors and your in-house maintenance team. All right. So to recap there, methods for reporting on vendors. We have our work order completion charts. We can filter the summary dashboard, and we can group the time and cost report details by vendor. It's going to be very handy in there. We can even make custom vendor dashboards, adding all your filter charts to custom dashboards in order to collect vendor-related insights in one easy-to-access location. By centralizing that information, you're empowered to make comparisons between your data points. That's what's going to help us make data-driven decisions and make sure we're doing what is best for the company and best for our team. All right, so we have a live Q&A session, which is always the most nerve-wracking part for me. So I believe the team has gathered some questions for me there, and I'm going to ask Zach if you can test me, essentially.
Yeah. How would it feel going 40 minutes into a deep dive and then straight into 10 minutes of questions? For
My
those of
brain's
you,
doing its best.
for those of you I haven't met, my name's Zach. I'm on the customer education team here at MaintainX, and yeah, I'm going to be posing some questions that came through related to vendors over to Mary. So, Mary, first question we have. Using the external work orders feature, is it possible to have recurring preventive maintenance work orders automatically sent out to the vendor assigned to a work order?
Okay, so this is a great question. Um, and the answer is not exactly, because we can tag a vendor to a recurring work order, just like I did in here. I tagged Mary's external contracting to this work order, but it's not going to automatically send it out every time. We might want to control the information that's going across, for example. So when this next iteration comes up, which I'll go on my next one, I would then be able to share externally. Now, this will probably be beneficial to you because you'll want to determine exactly when someone is going to receive that information. So it gives you a little bit more control there. So make sure to take a look into that when you have your recurring work orders with an external contractor.
Okay. Next up, staying on the topic of external work orders, is it possible to see who leaves comments or is completing work in an external work order?
Another great question. So you can see that a comment has been left and you can communicate with them, but you're not going to see which individual contact it is at a given company. You will see that it is the company. If you need more granular information, like who leaves what comment, who exactly completed what at what time, that would need to be a user in the system, much like your users are. This will just let you know that Mary's external contracting left a comment at this time.
Gotcha. Okay. And then actually, we did have a related question. So I think the answer is going to be similar here. But if you had multiple vendors on a work order and assigned to contacts from more than one vendor, would the same thing apply on the external work order in terms of seeing who's leaving comments or completing work?
Exactly. You're not going to see that individual contact name in there. It's the exact same principle.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, Moving on. Is there any reporting that we can do in MaintainX on the reliability between vendors and purchase orders, thinking things like completion rates or were purchase order or were orders received on time?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what we were discussing within reporting in here. Any of these graphs that you see, so say, for example, if that one was mentioning specifically the on-time V overdue, but it may be related as well to something like status, so we can see, what's outstanding. Any of these graphs, if we hop into them, we can group by vendor and we have the same filters there. So really anything you're reporting on for your internal team, you can report on for your external contractors and your suppliers as well. You would just need to be looking into those vendors and shared externally filters in order to do so.
Okay. Um, Second to last question here. And I think you covered this in your demonstration, but can a vendor leave their time and costs on a work order that's been shared with them externally?
Okay, this is a great question. Yes, they can leave their time. So they could say, I spent 2 hours and 30 minutes on this, and they can put in their cost. They can put in this is going to cost you $9,000, and they can put in an invoice. But it's a little bit different from when an internal user does it. If you remember, when we're looking at a work order as an internal user, I'm able to leave here an itemized list of parts. I can record my time, and I have other costs. So for a vendor, their costs are going to automatically populate in the other costs section here. And they wouldn't be adding in sort of like itemized parts and such in here. So it's different to an internal user, but yes, they would be recording all of their costs in here.
Okay, you ready for the last one?
I don't know.
So you gave us a great demonstration of external work orders and sharing information with our external contacts. But what if I want control over what vendor with whom I'm sharing a work order control over what they see on that work order. Is there any way I can configure the fields or what they're able to do with the external work order?
Yeah, good question. And this comes down to, sort of data security and such. There might be things we want people to see. There might be things we really don't want them to see. Yes, you can. I mentioned when we were making, a PDF export and when we were doing an email work order, how you can check off and check on what they see for that given one. But we can set some defaults for external work orders as well. And this is a really important point. So on this page right here, we are going to go to settings. Settings live in your bottom left-hand corner. And we're going to go to features. When we're in features here, we are going to go to work orders, and the top box right here is external work orders. If we go on customize shared work order access and permissions, pretty much everything you see in a work order right here, you can toggle to on or hidden. So for example, we don't want them to see the procedure, great, hide it. We do want them to see the procedure, but we don't want them to fill it out, great, they can just view it. All of these things you can really interact with to make sure this is customized according to your needs and also your company's policies as well. Whew.
Awesome.
That's
all the questions.
That was a great question. Before I let you go, before I let you guys hop, there's just a few things we want to cover. Firstly, let's just summarize this information. We went through a lot of information today, and a big thanks to Zach and the customer education team for popping this all together for us. But key takeaways. Firstly, we want to consolidate our vendor records. Use your CMMS as a single source of truth to capture all vendor information in standardized records that are connected to your parts, assets, and work order templates. Secondly, embed vendors in your purchasing workflow. Create purchase orders as you review your on-stock parts, which are automatically routed to the appropriate parts supplier. Filter your purchase orders list by vendor to see which vendors have orders pending. Alternatively, if we're not looking at a parts supplier, if we're looking at an external contractor, we want to send interactive work orders to contractors in order to get real-time status updates and communicate with them directly while they are on the job. Filter reports for externally shared work orders in order to measure your contractor costs and throughput. Lastly, let's take all that information, let's measure vendor ROI. Analyze the on-time completion rates, analyze your time and parts cost in order to understand the value of your external contractors. You can bundle vendor-related charts into a custom dashboard even to make insights simple to access and to circulate. Now, I would love it if we can head away from here today and give this a go, but I'm aware that, adopting a new feature can be a little bit overwhelming. And just so you know, we have a bunch of different resources for you here. Firstly, we've got our Feature 101 and Office Hours webinars where you can learn live from a MaintainX product expert. Ooh, fancy. We do our Feature 101s monthly, Office Hours typically bi-weekly, little asterisks here as we are going into our summer hours. They're more likely to be once a month. In Office Hours, it's essentially an FAQ session the entire time. You have any questions, you can feel free to submit them in there. And not only will I answer them live, but I'll be able to demonstrate them for you as well. So it's a really great place to ask any questions you have, not just limited to vendor management, but any aspects of MaintainX. We'll be popping the registration link in the chat right here. There it is. So if you would like to either attend that session or to receive the recording of it as well, please do click that link and sign up for it now. It is Tuesday, July 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern or 10 a.m. Pacific. I'll be excited to see you then. Beyond these live sessions, we have MaintainX Academy as well, where you can learn at your own pace through certifications, guides, and courses. A great way to either introduce yourself to MaintainX or to bolster your knowledge on your MaintainX instance. And if you'd like to learn from community, we have MaintainX Community, so you can learn from other maintenance professionals through different discussion boards. Thank you guys so much for attending. It is always a pleasure to have you. Always happy to share information how we can. Please remember to fill out your 1-minute survey following the webinar. Your feedback is incredibly helpful to make these sessions the best they can be. We really, really do value your feedback, so please do leave it there. Once again, thanks for attending, and you'll be receiving the recording of this session on July the 2nd.